What's going on, peeps? It's Wrath here, hanging out today, playing some idle heroes. I want to thank you guys so much for coming and hang out with me today. If you liked the video, please make sure to smash that thumbs up button and show your support. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well. Alright guys, today, we're going to talk about the top 4 in the Fortress faction, because it is next on the list. Alright, we did Shadow the other day, so we're going to do Fortress, so let's jump into it. Alright, top 4 here. First one we're going to jump into is one that everybody knows and almost everybody uses, and that's good old Ice Blink. Alright, Ice Blink is everywhere, and there's a good reason for it. He's awesome. Alright, let's just say it. He's really good. So we'll jump through and read his skills and stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about where he fits and why he's good. Alright, so first up his active skill here, 148% damage against all enemies, 30% chance of freezing for 2 rounds, and also gains an extra 30 points of energy once he's 10-starred. At 9 and below, he just does the freeze, which is still really good, and still why he's used everywhere. Gains attack and armor break, kind of a little passive there. Every time he's attacked by an enemy, he reduces their attack by 9% and increases his own attack by 9%. That's really powerful, and that's why you do see quite a few frontline Ice Blinks running a tanking role with HP stones and reduced damage artifacts, because he gets a really big buff in his own damage by doing that, and he also debuffs the entire enemy team pretty heavily, which is a really good deal. That's why you see a lot of him. This last one here, anytime an enemy is frozen, he deals an extra 110% of attack damage against them, which is pretty fantastic, especially if you have a team that has more than one freezer, like a Corpse Demon, perhaps. Stuff like that. So, very solid hero. He mainly shines in PvP. That's where most people use him. 90% of people, PvP. Very solid there. Limited use in PvE. He's not really great against Marauders and or bosses. Brave Trial is kind of like a mix of PvP and PvE. He works well there, obviously. He's not really an Aspen hero either. And I would say his best use in PvE is going to be the Tower of Oblivion, where his crowd control can really be a benefit to your team. That's probably his best PvE moment. So, really solid in PvP. That's why you see so many of them. Really good hero, and that's why he's the first one on the list. Before I go any further, the list's order 1 through 4 has nothing to do with how good or bad the hero is. Number 4 is no worse than number 1. It's just a different hero for a different situation. They are the top 4 heroes, in my opinion. Alright, second up here is going to be Sigmund. Sigmund is an absolute PvE monster. If you guys have one of these dudes, if you've used somebody to help you kill a boss that has one of these dudes, you already know this guy right here is capable of dropping freakish amounts of damage. Amazing in the PvE area. He is an essential part of any boss-killing team. He's amazing at bosses, Marauders. Pretty solid in the Tower of Oblivion as well with his massive amount of counterattacking. So we're going to jump in, read a little bit about his skills, and talk a bit about him. Alright, so first up, his active skill does 156% of his attack is damage against 3 random enemies, reducing their armor by 30% and burning them for an extra 54% of his attack is damage for 3 rounds. If the target's a warrior, does 86% more burning damage, cannot be dodged. Okay, the main thing takeaway here is he's going to strip off 30% of armor, which is a big deal, especially during boss fights. The more armor you strip off, obviously, the more damage you deal to them. Really solid. But that's not the only thing that makes him good. His passives are what really make him shine. This first one here, his attack has a 100% chance to reduce the target's armor by 24%, dealing 45% attack damage each round for 4 rounds, and increases self-damage to the burning target by 40%, and that lasts for 4 rounds. So this right here is basic attack. Not only does a dot, it also strips off armor and increases his own damage to that target. As you can see, in a PvE situation, that is huge. Any kind of boss is going to be losing armor just to the basic attack and now taking increased damage from Sigmund himself. This guy puts out massive damage because of that, but that's not it. This is more of a little secondary passive, armor, attack, HP, stuff like that. But the last passive here is another big deal. After being attacked by an enemy whose armor is lower than his own armor, he has a 100% chance to counterattack, dealing 180% of his attack as damage. Why is that important? Mainly because he has the highest armor in the game. Not to mention, bosses and Marauders that may have more armor than him won't for long after he basically attacks them and then active skill hits them. He's going to reduce their armor by nearly, actually over 50%. pretty insane. So very, very solid at dealing with bosses. He does have use in PvP, not so much in super duper in-game teams, where everyone relies on crowd control, because any hero that's crowd controlled is trash, but Sigmund especially. Without any ability to crowd control himself, he relies heavily on his counterattack to deal damage. In PvP, he doesn't get a great chance to do that. Early to mid-game, though, he's fantastic in PvP. He'll work very well for you, especially taking out enemy meat shields like Gru's, Dragon Slayer, things like that, because he's going to be able to stack that reducing armor effect on them and counterattack constantly, and he can do a pretty nasty amount of damage. Like I said, in-game teams, not so much. He does get crowd controlled a little bit too easy and kind of loses his viability. But before that, really amazing. Tower of Oblivion, great for the counterattack. He can wipe out some Tower of Oblivion nodes pretty easy. Not great in the Aspen dungeon. Okay to break a couple of nodes, of course, but with no self-sustain, he's not a hero you take in at, wave 1 and push through. He's someone you throw into those tricky nodes and try to whittle them down a little bit. Really, really good hero. If you're going for a PvE build at all, this guy almost has to be in it because he does an amazing amount of damage to bosses and marauders. Alright, so there's number 2 off the list. Number 3 here is going to be Emily. Emily is a support-based hero. She's absolutely fantastic. We're going to read through some of her skills real quick, then talk a bit about her. First up here, her active skill is 116% attack as damage against all enemies. Not a big deal. She's not your damage dealer. It reduces their hit by 20%. If you don't know what hit is, it's pretty much your accuracy. The less hit you have, the more likely you are to miss. Increases speed by 30 points and attack by 20% for all allies for 3 rounds. That's why people run her. Okay, she's a support unit. She makes your team faster. In PvP, that is the key to victory. And also boost your attack, which is fantastic. Can't go wrong with an attack boost. The speed is the main thing, though. It allows your crowd control heroes, whether it be an Ice Blink, Demon Hunter, whatever it is, Kamath, it allows them to get their crowd control skills off before enemies do. If you guys don't know, that pretty much decides battles. If your crowd control lands first, and you actually land your crowd control, you're in really good shape. Really, really good shape. That's why a lot of people run her. The second here is just a little passive. Increase HP and speed by 50. She has a pretty high base speed for a priest. Not to mention priests do get 2 different speed boosts in the guild tech tree, so she can be very fast. Alright, over here, her basic attack targets 3 random enemies. Again, not a really big deal. Her main selling point is her active skill. And this last thing here, when she falls below 50% health, she increases all your allies' attack by 29% and reduces all enemy armor by 29% as well. The reduction in armor, not a huge deal, at least not in PvP, but the increase to attack for your team is pretty powerful. You don't see a lot of one-slot Emily's for a pretty good reason. You want to make sure she survives to get her active skill off, but anytime she does fall below 50% health, it's going to give you a pretty nice buff and the enemy a pretty nice debuff. Does she work amazing in PvE? Certain aspects. She's solid in the tower for the attack boosting. Speed doesn't really matter there, generally speaking. Aspen Dungeon, not really your thing either. Solid in Brave Trials, it's a mix between PvE and PvP, so it's a pretty solid run there. Bosses and Marauders, a little bit. Not as good as a lot of other support heroes. Mainly, well, not really support. I guess, well, Cruz is kind of support. Cruz and Heartwatcher kind of own the support role against bosses, but she's not horrible in those areas. She is mainly built for PvP, and she's pretty good at it, which is why you see a lot of them in in-game teams. That's her deal. That's kind of her role. You can run her with an energy artifact if you want to get her active skill off in the first run to kind of help counter, maybe an enemy Demon Hunter getting their skill the second round and maybe silencing her before she can pop her skill. Up to you if you want to do it that way. Speed Stone, probably not a bad deal for her. Up to you. Solid hero. That's why she's in the list. All right, that was number 3. Number 4 was actually kind of a toss-up. But when it came down to it at the end, I had to look at just the Fortress faction. I was kind of like comparing to other factions. It's like, you can't do that. This is top 4 for Fortress only, not game-wide. And that slot went to Ormus, the original, the OG, the healer. All right, now, ever since Vesa came out, this guy's lost a lot of his use because Vesa kind of took over it. She does what he does, just better. Better healing, better damage. pretty solid. But if you're going for a fortress build, if you're not using forest, or if this is what you got, Ormus is still a really solid healer. He's still good at what he does. And in the forest faction, or the fortress faction, he is still a really solid hero, which is why he made this list. All right. Obviously, you guys don't know, his active skill does 125% of his attack as damage against 2 random backline enemies, heals all allies for 200% of his attack as HP, with a 30% chance of healing 340% of his attack as HP extra each round for 3 rounds. So obviously, pretty big heals there, which is what he's for. He's a healer, kind of a support hero, not a damage dealer. His attack, his basic attack, has a 100% chance to deal an extra 50% of damage. His attack is damage, and also heal a random ally for 50% of attack as HP each round for 3 rounds. That's not bad. That helps survivability in your team. In an Aspen dungeon, it's going to be a little bit of a self-heal for him as well. This is just his standard passive buff, HP and attack. This last one here, when he falls below 30% health, he heals all allies for 135% of his attack as HP. Can only be triggered 1 time. Most of those skills can be. But anyways, this guy is pretty good all around. All right, just going to say it. He's good in the Tower of Oblivion because he can heal your team. That's fantastic. He's good in the Brave Trial because he can heal your team. That's always good. He's good in PvP because he can heal your team, and that's always good. A little less now that you see more Vessas. Vessa kind of took his spot there, but he still can be used there, and he's not bad. Okay, he's not a bad hero by any means. Aspen Dungeon, awesome in the Aspen Dungeon. It's kind of his bread and butter early on. Of course, again, once you get a Vessa, if you have a 10-star Vessa and a 10-star Ormus, you're going to take Vessa into the Aspen Dungeon. She is a little better, but still, Ormus is not a bad hero. Against bosses, you don't normally need him, but it's not a bad idea to have one. You know what I'm saying? Keeps you topped off, especially against like harder bosses that actually can put out damage to kill your team, like guild bosses. Being able to heal is kind of essential there. The Celestial Island bosses, but in terms of Marauders, and even some of the early on, what are they called, Broken Spaces bosses, you don't really need a healer that bad. I mean, kinda. Marauders, not really at all until the end game. The high-level Marauders, you probably do need a healer there. But anyways, solid hero. That's why I put him at number 4. It was a pretty close tie on number 4 between about 3 different heroes, let's be honest. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like, whoa, Raph, what the crap? Where's Mickey? Well, she's going to be featured here in the honorable mentions. Mickey is still a really solid hero. She's not God tier where she used to be. The big thing people do with Mickey is they build her as a dodge hero, okay? She comes naturally with, where's that at? Right here. A natural 25% dodge chance, which isn't bad, but she also gets dodge every time she attacks, which means you can build her dodge up to, I don't know if it caps at 75 or 80%, I can't remember. Either way, you can build her dodge up really high to where when enemies try to attack her, they miss. If enemies miss their attacks, obviously they don't build any active skill energy, which can really help your team out. And that's where most people ran her. They ran a Mickey in one slot to kind of screw over the enemy team without them being able to build up active skill energy. It works moderately effective, and it still does. A lot of people have it built to counter, though, with energy artifacts on things like Demon Hunter and Ice Blink. Where does it matter? They've got their active skill first round anyway. Kind of like that. She is still really good. She's not super amazing in PvE. I've seen some people drop some nasty damage with her, because she does have not only a bleed, but also a poison dot, and she gains 40% attack with her active skill, which means she can put out a pretty decent amount of damage. Not like God tier damage, but not bad. Not bad. She's there in the honorable mentions because she does still have use, and if you want to build a Mickey for your team, you still can, and it is still viable. Okay, you can still do it. It's not going to kill you. Another one here was going to be ODO1. A lot of people trash talk ODO1 because he has very limited use. That's true. He's kind of like Field and Lutz. It's really dependent on what enemy you're fighting. If you're fighting an enemy that's using the good old Vessa, Rosa, Emily kind of team, yeah, this guy's going to be fantastic because his active skill stuns priests and does extra damage to them. He absolutely melts priests. So in the Tower of Oblivion, those big priest nodes like Gurkies and crap like that, he does a pretty solid job there. That's kind of where he shines. But when the enemy team isn't running priests, or they're not really dependent on their priest, he really falls behind. Okay, he doesn't really have that great of damage output for PvP. Not really that great in the PvE sitch either, especially not against bosses. doesn't do enough damage. But like I said, he's situational, and in those situations where he's good, he's very good. All right, taking out Vesa, Ormus, Rosa, Emily, stuff like that, Cruz even, really solid at it, and that's kind of where he shines. All right, the last one here that I want to talk about for a second is going to be Flamestrike. Not a lot of people use Flamestrike in like official and private server anymore, especially not in-game teams, because she's too easy to counter. She has a pretty low speed, which means she's 99% of the time Demon Hunter, Ice Blink, or someone is going to crowd control her, and she's going to kind of lose all effectiveness, especially if she dies early on. Because if you guys don't know about Flamestrike, her main deal here is that she builds attack and skill damage for each killed ally, so as your team dies off, she gets stronger, but she also builds crit and crit damage as enemy heroes die. So the longer a battle essentially goes, the stronger Flamestrike gets. The big deal with her that I see the most use is in seasonals, and I would assume even outside of seasonal, in the Tower of Oblivion. Alright, people set up those little, level 1 teams with a Flamestrike at the end. The enemy team wipes out all the first line enemies. Flamestrike's the last one left, so she has a huge amount of buff right now because her team has died. Smashes the enemy, kills a few of them. If they don't all die from that first skill drop, the second skill drop's going to have a bunch of crit and crit damage stacked to it, so it pretty much finishes it out. That's kind of the meta in Tower of Oblivion, at least in seasonal. That's how I see people climb past like the 400 floor. They're using Flamestrike strat. So she's still viable in that area. Not so much in PvP. She's mainly for the tower, and she does have a lot of use in the Trial of the Champion as a troll hero. I see a lot of people run that same setup with like level 1 heroes and a 10-star Flamestrike on that last node. And even without a monster attached to that, that Flamestrike can still one-shot a team, so it can be dangerous to fight those, alright? Anyways, those are the top ones. Some people may say, Mirage, Bleaker, Honor Guard have some use. Yes, they have limited use, not very much, alright? I don't see them very often. There's a good reason you don't see them very often. They're outclassed by the other ones, but there you go, guys. Those are the top 4 Fortress, plus the honorable mentions, I guess, of course, too. You got Ice Blink, you got Sigmund, you got Emily, and you got Ormus. All right, those are the top 4 in my opinion. Honorable mentions, ODO1, Mickey, and Flamestrike. 3 still pretty solid heroes that do have uses, just not that top tier. All right, so there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please make sure to smash that thumbs up button and show your support for the channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe as well. It really helps me out. And I will see you guys in the next one.